I never expected to find out the way I did. It was a Tuesday morning in late September when I walked into the county clerk's office to file some paperwork for our fall harvest insurance. The farm had been in our family for 4 generations, and I'd been working it alongside my father since I graduated high school 10 years ago. Every sunrise found me in the fields. Every sunset saw me planning for tomorrow's work. The clerk, Mrs. Henderson, had known our family for decades. She smiled warmly as I approached her desk, but something in her expression seemed off. "How's your father doing with the transition?" she asked, shuffling through the papers I'd handed her. "What transition?" I asked, confused. Her face went pale. "Oh, honey, I thought you knew. The deed transfer went through last month. Your father transferred the farm entirely to your brother Michael." The words hit me like a physical blow. Michael, who lived in the city and visited maybe twice a year. Michael, who had never shown any interest in farming and had actually mocked my choice to stay on the land. Michael, who had a successful career in finance and had always made it clear he thought farming was beneath him. "There must be some mistake," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Henderson pulled up the records computer, her fingers clicking across the keys with practiced efficiency. "I'm sorry, dear, it's all here. The original deed listed you and Michael as joint inheritors, but last month your father filed paperwork removing your name entirely. Michael is now the sole owner." I felt the room spinning around me. 10 years of my life, 10 years of backbreaking work, 10 years of believing I was building something for my future. All of it gone with the stroke of a pen. I thanked Mrs. Henderson and walked out of that office in a daze, my mind reeling with questions and hurt. The drive home felt endless. Every field I passed, every fence post, every barn reminded me of similar structures on our land that was no longer mine. I had poured my heart and soul into that farm, modernizing equipment, improving crop yield, caring for the livestock like they were family members. How could my father do this to me? How could he erase me from our family legacy without even telling me? The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound I'd ever experienced. Chapter 2. The Confrontation. I found my father in the barn, tending to our prize Holstein cow, Bessie. She was due to calve any day, and I'd been monitoring her closely. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, still caring for animals that were no longer technically mine. "Dad, we need to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He looked up from checking Bessie's feed, and I could see guilt flash across his weathered features before he composed himself. "What about, son? About the farm deed? About how you removed my name without telling me?" His shoulders sagged, and for a moment he looked every one of his 62 years. "How did you find out? Does it matter? What matters is that you did it. 10 years, Dad. 10 years I've worked this land, thinking I was building my future here." He set down the feed bucket and turned to face me fully. "You don't understand the whole situation. Michael has opportunities, connections in the city. He can do things with this land that you can't." "Like what? Sell it to developers? Turn it into a shopping mall? Like make it profitable," he snapped, his defensive anger rising. "This farm has been struggling for years. We both know it. Michael has ideas, investors who might be interested in agribusiness ventures." I stared at my father, this man who had taught me to love the land, who had shown me how to read the weather and understand the seasons. "So, you're just going to hand it over to someone who sees it as nothing more than a business opportunity?" "I'm securing the family's future," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Whose family? Because apparently I'm not part of it." And the words hung between us like a challenge. I could see the pain in his eyes, but also the stubborn determination that had always defined him. He'd made his choice, and he wasn't going to back down. "You'll always have a place here," he said quietly. "Michael will need someone to manage the day-to-day operations. As an employee," I said bitterly, "working for my brother on land that should have been half mine. It's still family land." "No, Dad, it's Michael's land now. You made sure of that." I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. "Where are you going?" "To pack my things. If I'm not family enough to inherit, then I'm not family enough to stay." The look of shock on his face almost made me reconsider, but the hurt was too deep, the betrayal too complete. Chapter 3. Memories in the Attic. I spent the next few hours in my childhood bedroom, mechanically packing clothes and personal items into boxes. Each object held memories. The FFA trophy from high school, photos of me with prize-winning livestock, certificates from agricultural extension courses I'd taken to improve my farming knowledge. As I worked, my mind kept drifting to my grandmother. She had passed away 5 years ago, but her presence still filled this house. Grandma Rose had been the heart of our family, the one who held us all together with her wisdom and unconditional love. She had always told me I had the soul of a farmer, that the land was in my blood. "Your grandfather would be so proud," she used to say as we walked through the fields together. "You understand this land the way he..." It's not just about crops and cattle. It's about being a steward of something precious. I found myself climbing the narrow stairs to the attic, drawn by memories, and perhaps a desperate need to feel connected to someone who had truly understood me. The attic was filled with decades of family history, old furniture, boxes of photographs, and Grandma's personal belongings that no one had been able to bring themselves to sort through. Her old trunk sat in the corner, covered with a dusty sheet. I'd helped her organize it once when I was 12, fascinated by the treasures it contained. Letters from my grandfather during the war, her wedding dress, family documents, and keepsakes from a lifetime of memories. I opened the trunk carefully, breathing in the faint scent of lavender that still clung to the fabric lining. Everything was exactly as I remembered, neat, organized, and labeled in her careful handwriting. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just seeking comfort in her memory. That's when I saw it. A manila envelope tucked into a side pocket, labeled "Important Papers," in her distinctive script. My hands trembled as I opened it, not sure what I expected to find. Inside were several documents. Her marriage certificate, my grandfather's military discharge papers, and at the bottom, a handwritten will dated just 6 months before her. My heart stopped as I read the opening lines. I, Rose Margaret Patterson, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath my portion of the Patterson family farm to my grandson, who has shown the dedication and love for this land that ensures its preservation for future generations. The will was detailed, specific, and legally binding. Grandma had owned a 50% stake in the farm, something I'd never known. Chapter 4, The Legal Truth. I sat in that dusty attic for over an hour, reading and rereading Grandma's handwritten will. The document was thorough and precise, written in her careful script and witnessed by 2 signatures I recognized, Dr. Morrison, our family physician, and Pastor Williams from our church. Both were respected members of the community, whose testimony would be unquestionable. The will explained everything in Grandma's characteristically clear manner. When my grandfather died 20 years ago, he had left his half of the farm to my father, while Grandma retained ownership of her half. She had the legal right to bequeath her portion to whomever she chose, and she had chosen me. To my dear grandson, the will continued, who has shown through his actions and dedication that he understands the true value of this land. It is not merely property to be bought and sold, but a legacy to be preserved and nurtured. I trust him to be a good steward of what our family has built. There were specific clauses about water rights, mineral rights, and even the old oak tree where my great-grandfather had proposed to my great-grandmother. Grandma had thought of everything, protecting not just the land, but the family history that went with it. I realized why I'd never known about this arrangement. Grandma had been a quiet woman who handled her affairs privately. She'd probably assumed that my father would tell me about her ownership stake when the time came, never imagining that he would try to cut me out entirely. The date on the will was significant too, 6 months before her death, but only 2 months after Michael had announced his engagement to a woman whose father owned a development company. Grandma had been sharp as a tack until the end. She'd seen which way the wind was blowing. I carefully folded the will and placed it back in the envelope, my mind racing with the implications. This changed everything. My father couldn't simply give away land that wasn't entirely his to give. Michael might own 50% of the farm, but the other 50% was legally mine. I thought about Grandma's words to me just weeks before she died. Remember, sweetheart, sometimes the most important things aren't the ones that make the most noise. Keep your eyes open and your heart true, and you'll find what you need when you need it. At the time, I'd thought she was just offering general life advice. Now I understood she'd been giving me a clue, trusting that I would eventually find my way to this trunk and this truth. I climbed down from the attic with the envelope clutched in my hands, feeling like I was carrying a piece of Grandma's love and wisdom with. Chapter 5, The Lawyer's Office. The next morning, I drove to town with Grandma's will secured in a folder beside me. I'd barely slept, my mind churning with possibilities and plans. The law office of Patterson and Associates, no relation to our family despite the name, was located in a converted Victorian house on Main Street. Mr. Patterson was a man in his 70s who had handled legal matters for farming families in our county for decades. He knew our family history and had actually helped my grandfather with some property disputes years ago. His secretary, a kind woman named Betty, ushered me into his office with a warm smile. "Well, if it isn't young Patterson," Mr. Patterson said, rising from behind his massive oak desk. "I heard about the deed transfer. I'm sorry, son. That must have been quite a shock." "That's actually why I'm here," I said, placing the folder on his desk. "I found something in my grandmother's belongings that I think you need to see." He adjusted his reading glasses and carefully examined the handwritten. I watched his eyebrows rise as he read, occasionally making small sounds of interest or surprise. He studied the signatures closely, even pulling out a magnifying glass to examine the paper. "This is remarkable," he said finally. "Your grandmother was quite thorough. This will is properly executed, witnessed, and completely legal." I remember her coming in here about 5 years ago asking questions about property law and inheritance rights. She was very careful not to reveal her specific intentions, but now I understand what she was planning. So it's valid? It means what I think it means? Absolutely. Your grandmother owned 50% of the farm in her own right, inherited from your grandfather's estate. She had every legal right to bequeath that portion to you. He leaned back in his chair, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Your father may have removed your name from his portion of the deed, but he had no authority over your grandmother's portion. What does this mean practically? It means you own half the farm, free and clear. Your brother owns the other half. Neither of you can make major decisions about the property without the other's consent. Neither of you can sell without the other's agreement. The implications were staggering. Michael couldn't develop the land without my permission. My father's grand plan to hand everything over to his favored son had been thwarted by a grandmother's wisdom and foresight. There's more, Mr. Patterson continued. According to this will, you also inherit all of your grandmother's personal property, including some items that might be quite valuable. She mentions jewelry, antiques, and what appears to be a substantial savings account. I felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what Grandma had done for me. She'd not only preserved my inheritance, but had given me the power to protect the farm from development. Chapter 6. The Return Home. I drove back to the farm with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt since discovering my father's betrayal. The autumn afternoon was crisp and the kind of day that made you grateful to be alive, and our fields stretched out on either side of the gravel road, corn ready for harvest, pastures where our cattle grazed contentedly. This was my land too, half of it anyway. The knowledge filled me with a quiet satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with justice. I found my father and Michael in the kitchen, hunched over papers spread across the old oak table where our family had shared thousands. Michael had driven down from the city, probably to discuss his grand plans for the property. He looked up as I entered, his expression a mixture of guilt and defiance. "I didn't expect to see you here," Michael said, straightening his expensive suit jacket. "Dad said you were packing up." "I was," I replied calmly, setting my folder on the table. "But then I found something interesting in Grandma's trunk." My father's face went pale. "What kind of something?" Instead of answering immediately, I pulled out a chair and sat down at the table where I'd done homework as a child, where Grandma had taught me to play cards, where we'd planned each year's planting schedule. "Tell me, Michael, what exactly are your plans for the farm?" Michael glanced at our father before answering. "Well, I've been talking to some investors about converting part of the acreage to a residential development. The land values in this area have increased significantly, and we could make a substantial profit. And the farming operation? We'd probably scale it back significantly, maybe keep a small portion for agricultural use. Market it as farm-to-table living or something like that." I nodded thoughtfully. "Interesting. And you've already started making these plans, assuming you have full control over the property?" "I own the property," Michael said, his voice taking on an edge. "Dad transferred it to me legally." "Actually," I said, opening my folder and removing Grandma's will, "that's not entirely accurate." The silence in the kitchen was deafening. I could hear the old clock on the wall ticking, the sound of cattle lowing in the distance, the whisper of wind through the trees outside. My father stared at the document in my hands, as if it were a snake about to strike. "What is that?" he asked quietly. "Grandma's will, the real one, the one she wrote 6 months before she died, leaving her 50% of the farm to me." Michael's face flushed red. "That's impossible. Grandma didn't own any part of the farm." "Actually, she did. When Grandpa died, he left his half to Dad, and her half to her. She retained ownership until her death, when it passed to me according to this will." I placed the document on the table between us, watching as both men leaned forward to read it. Chapter 7. The Revelation. The kitchen fell silent except for the rustling of papers as my father and Michael read through Grandma's will. I watched their faces change as the reality of the situation sank in. Michael's confident expression crumbled first, replaced by confusion and then anger. My father just looked tired, as if the weight of his deception was finally catching up with him. "This can't be legal," Michael said, his voice rising. "Why didn't anyone tell me about this? Why didn't you tell me, Dad?" My father rubbed his forehead, suddenly looking every one of his 62 years. "I didn't know. Your grandmother never told me she'd written a will. I assumed when she died that her portion of the farm automatically came to me." "You assumed wrong," I said quietly. "Grandma was smarter than that. She knew exactly what she was doing." Michael stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the fields he'd been planning to develop. "This ruins everything. The investors, the development plans. None of it works if you own half the property." "That was probably the point," I replied. "Grandma knew you'd never been interested in farming. She wanted to make sure the land stayed in the family and stayed agricultural." "We could contest the will," Michael said, turning back to face us. "Claim she wasn't of sound mind or something." "You could try," I agreed. But Dr. Morrison and Pastor Williams both witnessed it, and they'll testify that Grandma was sharp as a tack right up until the end. Plus, I had a lawyer examine it this morning. It's ironclad. My father finally spoke, his voice heavy with resignation. So what happens now? Now we figure out how to move forward, I said. Michael owns 50%, I own 50%. Neither of us can make major decisions without the other's consent. I don't want to be a farmer, Michael said flatly. I never have. I have a life in the city, a career, a fiancé who thinks this whole place smells like cow manure. Then sell me your half, I suggested. I'll buy you out at fair market value. With what money? You're a farmhand. Actually, I'm a farm owner. And according to Grandma's will, I also inherited her savings account, which apparently has enough in it to make a substantial down payment. I can get a loan for the rest. Michael looked skeptical. How much could she possibly have saved? I smiled, remembering another detail from the will. Grandma was frugal her whole life, and she invested wisely. According to the bank statements in her papers, she had over $200,000 saved. The number hung in the air like a revelation. None of us had suspected that Grandma, who darned her own socks and grew her own vegetables, had accumulated such wealth. She left all of that to you too? My father asked. She did, along with her jewelry, which includes some pieces that have been in the family for generations. Chapter 8. Understanding Grandma's Plan. As the full scope of Grandma's plan became clear, I found myself marveling at her foresight and wisdom. She had quietly observed our family dynamics for years, watching as Michael pursued his city career, and I dedicated myself to the farm. She'd seen my father's favoritism toward his older son, and had taken steps to ensure that justice would ultimately prevail. She planned all of this, my father said, a note of admiration creeping into his voice despite his obvious distress. Your grandmother always was the smartest one in the family. She loved this land, I said, looking out the window at the fields that had sustained our family for 4 generations. But more than that, she understood what it meant to each of us. She knew Michael would see it as an asset to be monetized, and she knew I would see it as a legacy to... Michael slumped back into his chair, his development dreams crumbling around him. So what am I supposed to do with 50% of a farm I don't want? You have options, I said. You can sell to me, you can find another buyer for your half, or you can become a silent partner and let me run the operation while you collect your share of the profits. What kind of profits are we talking about? I pulled out a folder I'd prepared, containing 5 years of financial records. The farm has actually been quite profitable under my management. Dad might not have told you, but we've increased yields by 30% over the past 5 years, and our direct-to-consumer sales have grown significantly. My father looked surprised. I didn't realize the numbers were that good. Because you never asked, I said, not unkindly. You were so focused on the idea that farming wasn't profitable that you never looked at the actual figure. I spread the financial documents on the table, showing crop yields, livestock sales, and the farmer's market income that had become a substantial part of our revenue. We're not just surviving, we're thriving. Grandma knew that because she helped me set up the direct sales program. She did? My father asked. She was the one who suggested we start selling at the farmer's market. She helped me design our booth, came up with recipes for value-added products. She was my business partner in ways you never realized. The revelation seemed to hit my father hard. He'd been so convinced that the farm was failing that he'd missed the signs of its success. Meanwhile, Grandma had been quietly supporting my efforts and planning for the future. She believed in you, my father said quietly. I can see that now. She believed in the farm, I corrected. She believed in preserving what our family built and passing it on to someone who would care for it properly. Michael studied the financial records with the eye of someone who understood business. These numbers are actually impressive. If you can maintain this level of profitability, I can do better, I said confidently. I have plans for expansion, for adding value-added products, for developing agritourism opportunities. This farm has potential that we've barely tapped. Chapter 9. A new partnership. Over the next several hours, we hammered out the details of a new arrangement. Michael would retain his 50% ownership, but would function as a silent partner, allowing me to make day-to-day operational decisions. We would split profits according to our ownership percentages, and I would receive a management fee for running the operation. I want quarterly reports, Michael said, his business instincts taking over. Detailed financial statements, production reports, marketing plans. If I'm going to be a partner in this operation, I want to understand how it works. Fair enough, I agree. And I want a written agreement that gives me first right of refusal if you ever decide to sell your share. Also fair. My father had been quiet during most of these negotiations, but finally he spoke up. What about me? Where do I fit in all of this? It was a question I'd been dreading. My father had betrayed my trust, but he was still my father, and this was still his home. You can stay as long as you want, I said. This is your home, but the farm operations will be my responsibility now. I understand, he said, his voice heavy with regret. I made a mistake. I let my fears about the farm's future cloud my judgment about what was right. Why did you do it, Dad? Why didn't you just talk to me about your concerns? He was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the land he'd worked for decades. Because I was afraid, he admitted finally. Afraid that you'd end up like me, working yourself to death on a piece of land that might not be able to support you. I wanted better for you. This is better for me, I said. This land, this life, it's what I choose. It's what makes me happy. I can see that now. Your grandmother saw it all along. As evening approached, Michael prepared to drive back to the city. Before he left, he pulled me aside for a private conversation. I owe you an apology, he said. I never understood why you wanted to stay here, why you were content with what I saw as a simple life. But seeing those financial reports, understanding what you've built, I respect that. Thank you, I said. That means more than you know. I have one request, though. When you expand the operation, when you develop those agritourism opportunities you mentioned, consider bringing in some modern marketing techniques. I might not know farming, but I know business development. I smiled, seeing a possibility I hadn't considered before. Are you offering to help? Maybe. It might be interesting to apply some urban business strategies to a rural operation. Could be a good learning experience for both of us. As Michael drove away, I felt a sense of completion that had been missing since I'd discovered my father's betrayal. The farm was secure, my future was protected, and my family, complicated as it was still intact. Chapter 10. Honoring Grandma's Memory. That evening, I sat alone in the kitchen with Grandma's will spread out before me, reading it again by the light of the old lamp she'd used for her evening reading. There were details I'd missed in my initial excitement, personal messages, family stories, and instructions for specific items she wanted me to have. The oak rocking chair in the parlor, the will specified, where I rocked your father and uncle as babies, and where I hope you'll rock your own children someday. There was the china cabinet with her mother's dishes, the quilt she'd made for my future wedding, and a collection of family photographs dating back to the farm's founding. But it was the final paragraph that moved me most. To my dear grandson, I leave not just property and possessions, but the responsibility of being a bridge between past and future. This farm is more than land and buildings. It's the dreams and struggles of 4 generations. I trust you to honor that legacy while building something new and wonderful for the generations yet to come. I walked through the house that night, seeing it with new eyes. Every room held memories of Grandma. The kitchen where she'd taught me to cook, the parlor where she'd told me stories about our family history, the porch where we'd shelled peas and watched thunderstorms roll across the prairie. In her bedroom, I found more treasures she'd left for me. A wooden box contained old photographs of the farm through the decades, showing how it had grown and changed over the years. There were pictures of my great-grandfather breaking the first ground, my grandfather returning from the war, my father as a young man full of dreams and ambition. I also found her journals, decades of careful records about weather patterns, crop rotations, and farming. She'd been documenting sustainable practices long before they became fashionable, noting which methods worked best in our specific soil and climate conditions. Knowledge is the farmer's most valuable tool, she'd written in one entry. But wisdom comes from understanding that we're not masters of the land, we're its caretakers. I spent hours reading her observations, marveling at her insights and practical wisdom. She'd been conducting her own agricultural research, experimenting with companion planting, natural pest control, and soil improvement techniques that were decades ahead of their time. Her final journal entry, dated just a week before her death, was addressed to me. If you're reading this, then you've found your way to the truth. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you directly about the will, but I knew your father would try to talk me out of it. He means well, but he's never understood that some things are more valuable. Take care of our land, sweetheart. Make it sing. I closed the journal with tears in my eyes, feeling the weight and privilege of the trust she'd placed in me. Chapter 11. Moving forward. The next few months brought significant changes to our farm operation. With my ownership stake secured and Michael's financial backing, I was able to implement expansion plans I'd been dreaming about for years. We upgraded our equipment, improved our irrigation systems, and began construction on a farm store where we could sell our products directly to consumers. My father gradually adjusted to his new role, and I was surprised to discover that he actually enjoyed being freed from the financial pressures of ownership. He became my most valuable advisor, sharing decades of experience and helping me avoid mistakes he'd made in the past. Your grandmother would be proud, he told me one morning as we watched the sunrise over fields of winter wheat. You've taken everything she taught you and built something even better. Michael proved to be a valuable partner as well, bringing business expertise that helped us develop new revenue streams. He designed a website for our direct sales operation, helped us establish relationships with restaurants in the city, and even convinced his fiancée to feature our farm in her food blog. I never thought I'd say this, he admitted during one of his quarterly visits, but I'm actually proud to be part of this operation. You've turned farming into a real business. It always was a real business, I replied. We just needed to think about it differently. The farm store opened in the spring, featuring not just our own products, but goods from other local farmers as well. We offered everything from fresh produce and grass-fed beef to grandma's jam recipes and handmade crafts from local artisans. The agritourism component proved especially popular. Families from the city came to experience farm life, pick their own vegetables, and learn about sustainable agriculture. Children who had never seen a cow up close delighted in feeding our gentle Holstein, and their parents appreciated the educational value of understanding where their food came. I hired 2 full-time employees and several part-time workers, creating jobs in our rural community and helping other young people see farming as a viable career option. The success of our operation inspired neighboring farms to adopt similar strategy, strengthening the entire agricultural community. But perhaps the most meaningful change was personal. I met Sarah, a veterinarian who came to treat one of our horses and ended up staying for dinner. She understood my passion for the land and shared my commitment to sustainable practices. When I proposed to her in the same oak grove where my great-grandfather had proposed to my great-grandmother, she said yes without hesitation. We were married in the farmyard, surrounded by family, friends, and the land that had brought us together. As we danced to bluegrass music under string lights hung between the barn and the house, I felt Grandma's presence as surely as if she were standing beside us. Chapter 12. Full Circle. 2 years after discovering Grandma's will, I stood in the same kitchen where the confrontation with my father and Michael had taken place. But now the atmosphere was completely different. Sarah was at the stove, preparing Sunday dinner for our extended family, while our 6-month-old daughter napped in the oak rocking chair that Grandma had left me. The kitchen table was covered with architectural plans for a new barn and expansion of our processing facility. Our operation had grown beyond anything I'd imagined possible, but we'd managed to maintain the family farm atmosphere that made it special. Michael arrived with his wife and their toddler son, followed by my father, who had become the farm's unofficial historian and tour guide. He loved sharing stories about our family's agricultural heritage with visitors, and his enthusiasm for the farm's success had replaced his earlier pessimism. "The quarterly reports look excellent," Michael said, settling into his chair with a satisfied smile. "Profits are up 18% over last year, and the agritourism bookings are solid through the fall. More importantly," Sarah added, "we're building something sustainable, something that can support multiple families while preserving the land for future generations." As we gathered around the table for dinner, I looked at the faces of my family and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Grandma's wisdom had not only saved the farm, but had brought us all together in ways I never could have imagined. "I have an announcement," my father said, raising his glass of sweet tea. "I've been thinking about what your grandmother would say if she could see us all here today, see what this place has become." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "She always said that family wasn't just about blood. It was about the people who choose to stand by you and build something together." Looking around this table, I think she'd say we've finally figured out what family really means. We raised our glasses in a toast to Grandma's memory and to the future we were building. Outside the window, the fields stretched toward the horizon, green and productive under the summer sun. The land that had sustained 4 generations of our family was secure for the generations yet to come. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, I walked out to the small cemetery on the hill where Grandma was buried. I'd had a proper headstone installed, engraved with her favorite Bible verse. "She looketh well to the ways of her household, and eateth not the bread of idleness." "Thank you, Grandma," I said quietly, placing fresh flowers on her grave, "for seeing what I couldn't see, for planning what I couldn't plan, and for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." The evening breeze rustled through the oak trees, and I could almost hear her voice on the "You did good, sweetheart. You made the land sing." Chapter 13. Legacy preserved. 5 years have passed since that day in the county clerk's office when my world turned upside down. As I write this, I'm sitting in the same kitchen where Grandma wrote her, using the same oak table where our family has made countless decisions over the decades. The morning sun streams through windows that have witnessed 4 generations of our family's joys and struggles. Our farm has become a model for sustainable agriculture in the region. We host agricultural extension workshops, welcome university students for internships, and serve as a demonstration site for innovative farming techniques. The success we've achieved has allowed us to purchase 2 neighboring farms when they came up for sale, expanding our operation while keeping the land in agricultural. Sarah and I now have 3 children. Emma, who at 4 years old already shows a keen interest in the animals. Little Rose, named for her great-great-grandmother. And baby James, who sleeps peacefully in the same crib that once held my father and uncle. Each of them will grow up knowing the value of hard work, the importance of caring for the land, and the strength that comes from family bonds. Michael has surprised everyone by becoming genuinely invested in the farm's success. He's taken agricultural business courses, and now serves on the board of the State Farmers Association. His son spends summers with us, learning to drive a tractor and developing the same love for the land that has sustained our family for generations. My father, now in his 70s, has found new purpose in documenting our family's agricultural history. He's written a book about sustainable farming practices that combines traditional wisdom with modern techniques, and he speaks at conferences about the importance of preserving family farms. The handwritten will that changed everything sits framed in our living room, a reminder of the power of foresight. And visitors often ask about it, and I tell them the story of a grandmother who understood that the most important inheritances aren't always the ones that make the most noise. Grandma's legacy lives on in every decision we make, every crop we plant, every child who learns to love the land. She taught me that farming isn't just about producing food, it's about being a steward of something precious, a bridge between past and future. As I close this story, I can hear my children playing in the yard, their laughter mixing with the sounds of cattle and chickens, the whisper of wind through growing corn, and the distant hum of machinery tending to. This is the music of a working farm, the symphony that Grandma knew I would help create. The farm deed now bears both my name and Sarah's, but more importantly, it represents a promise to the land, to our family, and to the generations yet to come. We are not just owners of this property, we are its guardians, entrusted with preserving and improving it for those who will follow. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I hadn't found that will, if Grandma's wisdom hadn't saved our family's legacy. But then I remember her words. Keep your eyes open and your heart true, and you'll find what you need when you. She knew I would find it because she knew me better than I knew myself. She saw the farmer in me before I fully understood it myself, and she made sure that nothing, not favoritism, not misunderstanding, not even betrayal, could take away what was meant to be mine. The land endures, the family continues, and Grandma's love lives on in every sunrise over our fields. Thank you for listening to this story of family, betrayal, and ultimate redemption. It's a reminder that sometimes the people who love us most leave us exactly what we need, even when we don't realize it at the time. Please let me know in the comments where you're listening. I love hearing from people all around the world who connect with these family stories. And if you enjoyed this tale, please subscribe to our channel for more stories about family dynamics, justice served, and the power of love to overcome even the deepest betrayal. Your support means everything to us, and it helps us continue sharing these meaningful stories with people everywhere.